I swear to God, we skip a week of this and I forget everything. Live on Twitch, live on YouTube.
I need to get the
Hello, welcome to some
chat
Derps
up.
Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about add-ons and WeakAuras and all that sort of thing. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what we do on this podcast?
On this podcast, we like to talk about games, okay? We got a really important one, okay? A game that few of you have ever heard or played, okay? World of Warcraft. Did you guys know we're doing a World of Warcraft episode? Yeah, no. I this thing that they announced is crazy. I described it in the description as like one of the most important and impactful design decisions that the World of Warcraft team has made in years. And I stand like I think that's real. I think it's maybe the most important design decision the World of Warcraft team has made. But listen, we can get into the details in I don't know, we can get into the details in a second.
Yeah, so just to summarize what's happening here, um, a couple days ago, the World of Warcraft channel dropped a podcast that essentially said we're getting rid of WeakAuras, but not quite, right? Like it's basically it's to kind of summarizes we want to put more things in the game that like native to the game that you can use to duplicate, to make playing the game more legible, I guess is maybe the best way to put it, right? Something that they announced they're doing relatively soon is, kind of an auto rotation in both of that, like, we'll pop up a symbol of like what, a generalized algorithm thinks you should use next, right? Which, kind of like WeakAuras can fulfill that function, and including in this, like, a one button, just keep hitting this button and you'll do a pretty good rotation. You won't be able to play optimally because there'll be a GCD penalty to that, which is interesting on its own terms. But the big piece of news here is that as part of this, they're slowly going to pull back what live battle information that add-ons can access, in an attempt to make it such that they can put in mechanics that WeakAuras would trivialize, that they want players to be able to play against, but also at the same time in such a way that it doesn't feel bad, right? Like their whole thing is like, we're not taking WeakAuras away anytime soon. We're going to do this slowly, and at the end of it, we're gonna peel it back a little bit, because they, like in the past, they've tried to peel some stuff back, and there's just kind of been this arms race between WeakAuras and the dev team. But like the thought process here, I believe, is that there are certain things that they want to like make part of the rating experience that WeakAuras trivializes, but that they recognize that if they're going to do that, they have to like kind of like rearrange their design philosophy. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah. Yeah, it is wild to me how they went about this announcement. I feel like they did it this way for very calculated reason. Okay, like the community manager, like the my sort of marketing sort of sixth sense is triggering on this one, because what I feel like happened is they were sitting in a meeting and they were like, we plan on rolling back, functionality in our API, right, that you can connect into with your add-on. If we just do that without explaining ourselves, everyone's going to flip the fuck out. So before we do that, we need to integrate a bunch of the functionality that those add-ons provide to players natively, right? And so then what they're doing is they're announcing one of those features. This is the second one of those features. The first feature was the cooldown manager, which is kind of light WeakAuras,
Yeah.
just shows you all of your individual buttons on the screen, right? Um, the second one of these is the rotational manager, so the one that just kind of guides your rotation a little bit, which is like an add-on that I have never heard of called like Hakili or something. And then they also reference a couple of other add-ons that they're probably going to be making in-house versions of, like damage meters, and boss mods and stuff like that. And to me, this reads like they are soft launching, quietly kind of pitching like, hey, we're going to deprecate a lot of what these add-ons do so that we have tight control of how they interact with like tight control of kind of how they interact with the game. Um because that arms race, is one that I feel like they've just kind of decided that they lost. And the only option is kind of like de-armament basically on the side of add-ons like WeakAura.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because my sense from the conversation is you'd still be able to do like the kind of rotation, like the kind of icons on the screen for your own stuff, right? Like that. This is what I primarily use WeakAuras for, right? Is like setting up kind of a rotation guide for myself. But that's like not too bad or whatever. Bless you.
I'm
Uh,
so sorry.
but it's all good. But the thing that is interesting to me is like you said, the damage meter thing. That feels like they are doing that not because they need to actually do damage meters, but because if they leave open the damage meter piece, that somehow WeakAuras, the people who like make the guides like could reach into that that thing and figure something out from that and have to
That's exactly what I think they're doing. Actually, I think the changes here, this is my pitch. People are understating the depth of the changes that are going to happen here. I think it is going to be catastrophic to someone to WeakAuras, right? Like, I think they want to pull back quite a lot of the in combat second to second kind of functionality that these add-ons tick into. Um, and absolutely, damage meters 100% is going to be kind of a casualty of that, in my opinion. And like basically, they have to be able to stop if the API can stop a damage meter from reading damage in real time. It will also be able to stop a lot of what WeakAuras do. I think those two things are just drawing the same kind of streams of information, but WeakAuras is essentially using it to aesthetic end, where WeakAuras is saying, "Oh, you have 3 stacks of this buff. Okay, cool. This thing is lighting up on your screen. Hit that button, something like that, right? Um, your damage meter just tracks the number, right? Like that's just purely arithmetic. But what WeakAuras is doing specifically is WeakAuras is kind of taking that and putting it into the UI functionality of creating a graphic on your screen. I feel like if the WoW designers were approaching this in a good way, which I don't know that they necessarily sort of are, um, they really ought to look to provide the really, really, really deep, specific functionality that WeakAuras has, at least on a rotational level, because I think those are the WeakAuras that nobody will ever care about. But the WeakAuras that people do care about are like boss mod WeakAuras, like the ones that just take on a certain amount of cognitive load for the raid by just saying, okay, everybody download this WeakAura and do what it says when it pops up, which is not a fun or strategic part of raiding, but it is increasingly common for, not just high-end mythic raiders, but raiders like us who are only doing normal and heroic.
Yeah, no, and my sense of it from the discussion is that you're still going to be able to do your rotation stuff, right? Like with
Yeah.
with post these changes that WeakAuras is going to let you um, you know, put whatever you want on the screen, probably read your own buffs and debuffs, right? And move those around. Although it seems like they're going to make some of that functionality redundant. My guess is some of that is so that like if they do something that ends up like because they don't run WeakAuras, right? If they do something that ends up breaking kind of like the more core WeakAuras stuff, they'd be like, well, you don't need it anyway. We got our own stuff, right? Like, um,
Yeah.
yeah, uh,
I really I really wonder how deep they're gonna go on this. I feel like if we look traditionally at World of Warcraft, and how World of Warcraft designers have tackled problems like this from the past, I think we would all probably agree that they weren't the most effective at it. So something like in-game voice, the voice over IP, right? They have, the technology, it's all in there in the game, but nobody uses it. Everybody uses Discord or whatever else, Mumble back in the day or TeamSpeak or anything else kind of along those lines. And it was because the WoW, voice over IP just wasn't strong enough in order to kind of the it just felt unusable in kind of comparison. I I think that some of that is still sort of in kind of the WoW team, and when I look at the way certain things have been integrated into WoW, it doesn't feel like I don't know, they took the best. It's not like they took the add-on and just ported it one to one to WoW. They always kind of tinker with it to a certain degree. But that process was really interesting. So we'll sort of see where they kind of end up. When it comes to the implications for something like fights and encounters and all of that kind of stuff, where does that put you? Do you feel like?
Um, my guess is that people are going to be really mad. Um,
Yeah.
uh, and like I think what they were talking about made sense to me, right? Like there are certain challenges. Like if we took these tools away from you, we could put these challenges in the game that would be like fair and real challenges. The content would be like on kind of like a 1-to-1 level, like on a mod, on a mods list level, be less difficult than what we have now, but it's like made trivial by the other stuff. And so that makes sense to me that they want to pare some of that back so they can like add some neat stuff to raid mechanics. But people are gonna riot, right? Like would there's no two ways
I
about
feel
it.
like you and I know individual people. I'm gonna call out a friend of the cast. Low kicks is like the perfect archetype for a player who I think is going to have a really tough time if they deprecate specifically weak auras. But they were also talking about a couple of other sort of tools. I actually really like the idea that they also kind of attack DBM. I feel like this would be my hot take. Everybody would kind of agree, and I even on the cast, Dratnos and Max, who are both high end kind of mythic, top level sort of players. They're sort of the influencers for the archetype of the high end WoW player, right? They were both on board with this quite easily, right? They talked about it, how annoying it was that their first answer to any mechanic is, can a weak aura do this for us, right? Can we just get a weak aura that solves this problem for us, kind of thing. Um, and so I bet everybody's on board with that. But I bet there's a limit, and one of the limits that I would sort of assume is DBM, right? But I think I would probably say that that stuff like DBM, stuff like what's the other one that everyone uses? Not
Bigwigs.
bigwigs. Yeah, stuff like DBM, stuff like bigwigs, those ones are going to be on the way out too. Because once you can't read that stuff, they're not going to be able to have the stuff that triggers off of it. And that's probably good for the game. If you were it would be hard for me to make the case that I think DBM or bigwigs are better than sort of a halfway point native solution inside of World of Warcraft.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think there's like, some amount of like, uh, how much of your muscle memory is tied to like the specific sounds that have been playing out over, uh, DBM and bigwigs for 20 years, right? Like, even though it hasn't been in DBM for I think years at this point, I still like can hear in my head, "Run away, little girl," right? Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like the universal, like, oh, there's no like, and there's some part of me that wonders you like how useful it is to get rid of some of that stuff. So maybe some of that stuff survives, but there's also the kind of like, well, if the tool set's limited, how valuable is it as a mod, and does it continue to get supported, right? Like,
I think the big ones that really ought to get away are the audio cues. I think audio cues are really, really bad and probably pretty harmful for the design space. Like, I think getting rid of audio cues increases quite a lot the kinds of designs that you can put into stuff, because less so in Raid, a little bit in Raid, um, but more so in something like Mythic Plus, because Mythic Plus represents a whole dungeon. Mythic Plus represents more content on sort of some total than a raid, because you have a bunch of different bosses, a bunch of different trash, all this other sort of stuff. What DBM and Bigwigs allow you to do is group similar things kind of together in a way that we would probably call problematic. So for instance, if a mob has an ability where he puts a cone on the ground and shoots, and he has a voice line associated with that, right? Um, or there's like a visual effect associated with that. All of that stuff gets shortcut because what DBM does is it goes frontal, frontal. You know what I mean? And it's like all of these things get selected, kind of get smushed into just a frontal, which I bet is pretty pretty bad for sort of the design space.
I think
What you want?
I
Oh,
think I'm
are
going to
you with
disagree
me?
with that. Like I think
Okay.
I think maybe it's bad on kind of like a higher design space level, but I think they have to keep those things in, like for accessibility reasons, like and also just for like the game is kind of held together with duct tape reasons, right? Like the number of times like a frontal cone has not like properly laid over the ground, right? Or like how far is a flamethrower going, right? Because it's got like a wispy effect, right? Like you need. I think the audio cues there are kind of important, both in the kind of like a player that has less than great sight, right? Because the alternative here is also like turn your graphics all the way down. That way you get the flattest, most janky ass stickers that are easier to read, right? Like um, so there's a certain
I do
amount.
think that's a little bit fair, especially in the sense of I think about this quite a lot. The uh people talking about the Final Fantasy 14ification of WoW. A problem with
Buddy, you might
modern
be on the
Final
wrong
Fantasy.
mic. Duff is pointing this out to you.
I'm on the wrong. Oh, I'm probably on the wrong mic.
Yeah,
That's
no.
true.
Thank you, Delph.
Let's change. So one of the things that and to be fair, I don't watch
There you go.
or interact with Final Fantasy 14 content ever or at all. But my understanding is that right now all of the classes in Final Fantasy 14 feel homogenized. This is something that my friends have sort of told me, right? That like the classes really just kind of come down to one set of sort of things, and boss fights also feel pretty homogenized because everything is very well telegraphed, and so it just kind of becomes a don't stand in the swirl, like don't stand in the puddle kind of nature to sort of fights. And I do think that there is a certain amount of that when it comes to craft, and they've been moving in that direction, and that side of things is sort of like okay but dangerous, because what it does is this flattening effect, right, where instead of being able to have a wide variety interesting mechanics, they all just kind of get rounded off as frontals or soaks or I don't know, like interrupts, right? Does it matter what you're interrupting? Well, to DBM, no, because it tells you interrupt, right? Frontal, like all of that kind of stuff. And so getting away from the place that this is that rounded edge problem that I think getting rid of DBM helps with, because it means that people are now paying more attention to the actual things that are happening rather than just kind of responding to the audio
Oh,
cue.
okay. So I see what you're saying, and I think I think they'll probably end up doing something like this is that they will keep like a frontal cue in, but it won't differentiate between a soak frontal and a non-soak frontal, and or a like trivial frontal that you don't really need to worry about, right? Like those types of like, because I think you do need the audio cue, like I said, for accessibility reasons. And the thing that really clicked for me here when you talk about the interruptibles, right? Like the thing that makes it trivial isn't the interruptibleness, it's that it can tell you what needs to be interrupted and what interrupt is maybe a bait, right? Like
Yeah,
that kind of
absolutely.
thing. um and so I think you're right in that they will probably um weirdly flatten the notifications in a way that you won't be able to like tell which one is the right one to interrupt, type of deal.
Yeah, I actually bet that the notifications. I think there will be notifications, but my bet is the notifications will all just become diegetic. It'll be you hear, the boss with the gun loading his gun, and the loading gun animation is the frontal. And instead of associating the word frontal from DBM, you're associating the loading the gun animation. But that's specific to that boss. And there's a ton of different ones. Or a boss will have a voice line, right? Like, I think this happens just natively in WoW boss design
Sure.
pretty commonly, right? Where, if you play with the sound on, you will get notifications for what is happening in the boss fight based on listening to the voice lines that are coming out from the boss. And people will learn to rely on that kind of stuff more, but then it will always be specific to the thing. Do you know what I mean? Which is, in my opinion, kind of good.
Yeah, I mean, like I guess we will see. There's a part of me that thinks that, like, again,
Yeah.
for accessibility reasons, they might keep around some version of the generic thing. But that's
What do you think? So, an interesting example of this would be like an interrupt. Okay, so like for instance, in Plater, I have a Plater profile, and one of the things in that Plater profile is it highlights for me the important interrupts versus the bait interrupts. Right. So in a dungeon, there will be a mob, and the mob will have his bait interrupts. But when the important interrupt comes up, then the cast bar flashes, and that is, oh, okay, I need to get into melee and interrupt this one. Basically, what I've done there is I have used the add-on to take on the cognitive load of memorizing what the important interrupt is. Do you feel like that's good game design, bad game design? Is this the kind of thing that ought to go away? They should leave some version of it in the game?
Yeah, I mean, I don't use anything like this. Like, I just like learn which ones I need to. Part of it is that, like, I mostly raid, and raiding is like, if you can interrupt it, you can, because you've got like 37 interrupts on the team, right? Like, and so there's never a wasted interrupt, as long as you're actually interrupting. I don't know how I feel about it, because it's not like there's any particular skill to it, right? Like, presumably they're still going to have like the cast bar with the name of the ability that's being cast on it, right? And at that point, it's just kind of a memorization activity, which I don't know. Maybe there's something there. I have, definitely, in delves interrupted the wrong thing because I was just kind of panicking. And maybe this Plater thing you're talking about, like, makes that just kind of impossible. But so this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to say, as currently exists in WoW, I don't think there's any, like, I don't think it makes it any better for getting rid of it, but I could see a world where they develop a mechanic that kind of uses that kind of thing and uses it well in a way that would be good game design, that this Plater thing you're talking about would trivialize, right? So, like, they're kept from moving into that space because it doesn't add it. Like, there's no point in adding a super kind of like fun interrupt mechanic, because it will just be trivialized, right? And so maybe this frees them up to do something neat in that space.
How much do you value memorization mechanics? Like, is that an actual like a good skill test?
I don't think a pure memorization mechanic is particularly, and when I say like a pure kind of like, recognize that this thing is this thing is a great skill test, right? Like, if
Interesting.
inside of a fight, right? Like, memorize which like button the boss hit. I think that's fine, right? But like memorizing which ability to interrupt, I think is just kind of like whatever, right? Like that seems like not super valuable to me.
Interesting. Because I feel like I actually would say that it's a pretty valuable sort of like test. When I talk about like the way that I design monsters in D&D, right? Like, that's sort of a memorization test if you think about it, right? So for instance, I've talked about the Beastmen having burning blood, or another good example would be in Heretic Heroes, right? The D&D game that we're playing right now. You fought some revenants and learned a bunch of abilities that the revenants did. When you fight a revenant again, there is an expectation in my brain that you will go, oh, I remember. They don't have an AOO, but they do have a thing that can net you if you try and move out of range, so they can restrain you or something like that. And that's kind of a memorization test, but I actually think of that as skill testing, right? Like, in my mind, that's part of the strategic challenge of like design like this. And the MMO version of this would be in WoW. I run the dungeon and I don't know what any of the interrupts do, but as I'm running the dungeon, I can see what the bad interrupts are, and I tell myself, you know what, I'm not going to let that thing cast whatever, because it's really, like, when it casts whatever, that's when it gets really bad. And I've now memorized like that sort of thing. That feels like bad game design to you?
So I'm gonna put a difference here in that, like, the Revenant example is kind of like a knowledge. It's like a discovery thing, and right, it's like, oh,
Okay.
I've discovered this. Maybe that's a thing. You'd let a carefully prepared party either learn in advance through either a knowledge check or research or something, and that's like valuable in its own way. Like, I actually like if I were in your shoes running a game, right? Like, I don't know if like a player forgot a fine detail of how that worked and they asked me, I would just kind of give it to them, right? Like, your character's already learned that. They probably, they know about
Oh,
it.
that's actually really interesting. We
Yeah.
maybe talk about that in the back. I would not give them that detail.
You know, I
right?
mean,
in my mind, yeah.
But I think that's more of like, but that's not to say that like I think it's necessarily wrong to not give it to them, right? That's just kind of like you know, that's at the level of what it is, right? Like, you know,
Or I guess I would say, man, if it's a fine detail, yeah, you know what, I would
Yeah,
actually maybe give it. To
there's a granularity to this, but like,
yeah, exactly. Like, so for instance, if somebody were to say, does the net damage you or does it just restrain you? I would probably answer that question because they remember the core thing. Oh, they have this reaction of using the net, right? But they forgot the detail. Okay, sure, whatever. But if they were going like, oh man, I remember this thing had a spell that it could cast in reaction. What was that again? I would not give them that answer because like the core thing is learning what the reaction is, right? And they haven't gotten to kind of like that step.
sure, no, that's interesting. I'd have to think about how I feel about that but that question is not about it as a game mechanic. That's about like, you know, character player differential type stuff, right? Like
Yeah, for instance, in WoW, there's no ability for me to ask World of Warcraft. You know,
Yeah.
I have to let the interrupt go off or something. Like the best kind of
actually
approximation.
there is. It's called Shift J and opening up your adventure journal, right? Like,
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Maybe in like a
Yeah.
like a boss, you know, it would be something kind of along those lines.
but just to kind of finish the thought, WoW content is designed to be run over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? And at that point, I don't think the memorization is particularly valuable, right?
That's true. Like you guys are probably going to fight in some total. I mean, I don't know, like whatever, sub 5 or 10 revenants. You know, like how many revenants are you actually going to interact with in a 6 to 10 episode D&D campaign arc, right? Versus the amount of times that I have run the mother load or something like that, right? Like in mythical, like yes, I've interrupted hundreds of casts, right?
Joke said you when you were fighting for his revenants. Soul storm every session.
For the back half, okay. We'll save it. We'll save this all this D&D talk for the back half. But anyway, so I think I would probably actually say this is interesting. This kind of comes back to distraction makers because they talk a lot about memorization. And the one guy on that podcast who I think of as the me of that podcast is he doesn't like memorizing. He thinks memorization is a bad game mechanic, right? That you ought to have game mechanics of that you ought to have game mechanics that are around decision, like tests of decision making, which I would also agree with, right? And that tests around, you know, memorization are sort of bad, but I think that takes it too far. In my mind, like, you know, memorization is like 15% of a good game mechanic, right? There is something there, and there is an amount there that you ought to kind of just have and sort of reward. Even if I would say the other 85% is decision making, right? Like I really like testing decision making. I think that is kind of the heart and soul of games is decision making. So yeah, listen, we'll talk about it in the back half, Josh. Okay. When it comes to WoW specifically, do you use DBM or bigwigs?
I
right?
use DBM and I use WeakAuras.
Okay.
I don't usually go seeking out a WeakAura for a raid unless somebody in the raid posts it to chat, right? But I use DBM.
Yeah,
I'm
kind
not
of aggressively don't use WeakAuras for the raid.
Okay. I mean I mostly use it for rotation management.
Mhm. I think that's the most fair. Like
Yeah.
I everybody would agree. WeakAuras for rotational management is the fairest possible use of WeakAuras. It is WeakAuras for mechanics management that I think that they're mad about and that they will, you know, that they're trying to target.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I think it's kind of like you know, push pull type thing where it's like, well, if the mechanic's annoying enough, you're gonna you want like. Part of the problem is that like you said, the first reaction of a lot of people is to go find a WeakAura to trivialize, especially somebody who's like, you know, this maybe gets into kind of like a who are you designing for problem, right? Like, you know, is it fair to pull these things back because, you know, the world first raiders are going to, you know, WeakAura out every single little thing they can because that's an efficiency gain, versus like us who are like, you know, 90% of the time we don't use specialized WeakAuras. We get by with kind of like the generic DBM, like run away, you know, don't stand here type stuff. And then every once in a while, there's like a boss with like I haven't gotten to test it yet, but last week I wrote a weak aura to pop up on my screen an icon when I get the rolling coin buff at One Armed Bandit because I don't like they could solve that for me, right? They could like put a big golden sheen on the screen, but I'm having trouble monitoring that myself. So I just want a little reminder for myself, which
I do that all the time. I have
Yeah.
weak auras that track my tier set because I need to know when my tier set buff is up. And so in my weak auras, it just that icon pops up on my buff bar. This is the stuff that I actually think is this is the stuff I think they're gonna flub. If I'm a guessing man, I think that their weak auras are going to do a particularly bad job of helping you track those kinds of important kind of combat buffs and debuffs. And yeah, I don't really know. We'll see how that stuff goes.
I also think that combat buffs and debuffs are like the thing that they are safest to leave open, right? Like you're not reading anything directly off the enemy. You're reading something off of your character. Like, I know like maybe a couple weeks into the expansion, they added a buff for the Shadow Pan hero tree. What's it called? Like the stacks that get built on like the flurrying stacks that get built. That way you could set up a weak aura for it. And I think that that's good, right? Like I think that's fine. Yeah. I think they'll probably leave most of that. That actually gives them a pretty...
I actually think there's quite a lot of design where I've seen that. There's two things in Warrior where they made similar changes to make it so that the buff is a percentile. So, for instance, my Ignore Pain gives me a certain amount of a shield up to my, like, 40% of my max HP or something like that, 50% of my max HP. It used to have just that amount, that flat amount in the buff itself, which was very hard to sort of track and understand. But now what they did is they gave each stack of Ignore Pain is 1%. So you are stacking up and down from 100 to 25 to 35. It's like, that's much more grokkable kind of like number on its face.
And I think that also like gives them amount of fine gain control if they leave that in. It's like, do you get a debuff on this? Well, then you can, monitor it better. And if you don't, you don't, right? Like,
yeah, there's also one that had a ridiculous thing. It was like 240 stacks. Every 240 rage I spent, I got a big buff, which was a weird thing to track because it's like 240 rage. But they just changed that one to also be percentile, where each one stack represents 2.4 rage. And I feel like those changes are maybe a good sign.
Yeah. I do think they have like a vision for what they want to do with it. I just don't know if that vision is good.
You think that it's going to impact class design? Like, if we assume that there is a functionality that's at our fingertips right now, WeakAuras, right, which we can use to simplify deeply complex game mechanics, right? For instance, one of the things to the rotation of Fury Warrior is you get a stacking buff to a Bloodthirst's crit chance every time you use Raging Blow, and when you have Recklessness up, it's every 2 Raging Blows you want a Bloodthirst, and when you have Recklessness down, it's every 3.5 you want a Bloodthirst, and like all of that, I have a weak aura that tracks it. You know what I mean? It's the weak aura that goes, is Recklessness up? Do you have 2 stacks of the buff? And then it glows Bloodthirst. So I know, okay, Bloodthirst, bam. You know what I mean? That stuff is really complicated design that you just can't track intuitively, I would say. And my bet would be that if they deprecated some amount of weak aura, like working, obviously this, I guess, is kind of like buffs and debuffs, which I do think that they would probably like remain intact, but just to follow this sort of thought experiment. Do you expect that like that stuff would kind of be simplified, that they would design some of that kind of complexity out of the classes as it currently exists, because weak aura is kind of the crutch that gets to prop up that complexity?
I think so. During the podcast, they said something about like, how are you even supposed to play an outlaw rogue without weak auras or something like that, right? Like, and so, and that was like Hozzikostas, right? If I remember correctly, I was only half watching it, so I might have missed who it was. So like, I definitely think they will. There is an aspect of this that could be interesting in that, like, I think about fighting games, right? And like, at a certain level, you just have to start memorizing frame data to like really like get deep into like the competitive aspect. And like, is that a thing they want, right? Like, do they want to differentiate skill level on players based on, how well they can like, hold the context for these systems in their head? Which I think that's a fair test of skill than just like rote memorization. Because there's like an aspect of like keeping it in your head. But I also think that'd be super frustrating. I don't think this game is not Street Fighter 6, right? Like, so I don't think they'd want to do that. I think if I had to guess, I think they're happy where essentially we are, right? Can pretty reliably get ahead of the curve on heroic. Maybe you put a toe into mythic if you feel like it, right? And I think if they significantly change how any of that works at this point, then they kind of screw with that balance, and that's a problem.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, I probably agree. I probably agree with that. I feel like there's a certain amount of this that is designing for Mythic Raiders. Like I kind of think the tripwire was triggered by Mythic Raiders, right? Like if we assume that this is all a Claymore mine that is going off, the thing that it tripped that tripwire was Mythic Raiders, but I feel like the real weight of it, the reason that this is really kind of happening is because of Raiders like us. I think what they saw was in Shadowlands, there were intensely complicated mechanics that Mythic Raiders started designing WeakAuras around. And as Mythic Raiders started designing those WeakAuras, they began trickling down to Heroic and trickling down to normal guilds. And now all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, when our high-end players are doing this, that's okay. That's fine. When Mango and Buddy are doing this, that's rough.
Yeah. No, like the water finds a cracked effect, which we've talked about before,
Yes.
is happening, and it, like you said, it's trickling down, right? Like, maybe it's just that like the community sharing got too good, right? Like, when the Mythic Raiders just like had their own WeakAuras and like, didn't have a place to just post them. And now somebody's going to post them, right? Like, and you're going to get them and you're going to have fun. And maybe people just got too good at like writing, my guess is that if they could actually, now that I'm saying this out loud, I bet you this is something like they do. I think they'd be fine if the only WeakAuras, or if you could like use the tool, like the GUI in WoW for WeakAuras, if you could do that, I think they're fine with like all of that, right? It's the part where people are going and writing custom Lua scripts that they then paste into the import field. They compile into a string that WeakAura that imports. That's to like access functionality that it really can't get from the GUI. I think that's like kind of a dividing line, right? Like I'd maybe put things on, switch a couple things on either side of that line, but I think that's kind of like roughly the dividing line. Is that level of customizability. And if they bring it in-house, then they can do that, right? Like, if you can't do it in the GUI, sucks to suck, right? Like, and that's and there's an aspect there too, right? Like, I wonder how much of this is driven by like, now that Blizzard is part of Microsoft, some lawyer at Microsoft is like, you're effectively telling people that to effectively play this game, you have to go download third-party software and like run arbitrary code on their computer, right? Like, this is probably fine for now, but at some point, like there's going to be a lawsuit at some point in the future where, and you need to peel some of that back. I don't think that's like a huge concern, but I bet you there's something like that. Somebody has said something like that at some point, right? Like,
yeah, it's interesting because WoW has a very different sort of opinion to this compared to. So, for instance, in Final Fantasy 14, add-ons are banned. You can't use add-ons, but it is a thing that people want to do to interact with that game. They want a damage meter. They, and this is always it. This is the gateway, right? Oh, you get a damage meter. Ooh, now that's the gateway drug, and all of a sudden it feels like you're cheating, kind of like from then on out. And there's a lot of like race to world first stuff that happens in the Final Fantasy 14 community that is sort of a direct result of what we would call maybe kind of spiritually cheating, which you and I would maybe like disagree about, or we could have a whole separate argument, right? Like, does it count as cheating in a sort of ethical sense if in Final Fantasy 14 add-ons are banned, but world first teams use them in order to get ahead and get that world first kill, right? Like in order to get an advantage on sort of like a speedrunning thing. I actually think you could argue both sides of that pretty effectively. I feel like I could craft pretty strong arguments on either side of that issue.
This is like the Tour de France thing, right? Like, you know, like when the big blood doping bust happened, it like dropped down to the person that came like 13th or something, right? Like, you know, because everybody was blood doping, right? Like that's the same, like,
yeah. And I would like the pro argument of that. I am going to make these arguments because I think they're interesting. The pro argument of that is I don't give a fuck what the TOS says. This is speedrunning. Speedrunners use glitches and exploits all the fucking time, right? We are world first raiders. The only thing that matters. This is any percent, baby. I will glitch my way to victory, right? Like I think that's a pretty fair. Like that's a valid point of view. If I'm a world first,
you don't pay my sub, and if you're talking to Blizzard, I pay you my sub, right? Like, you know.
Yeah, exactly. The race to world first. This is player owned. You know what I mean? Like this is an expression of kind of group speedrunning or whatever. Totally makes sense. But I also think that if I was a Final Fantasy 14 player and I was making the argument, hey, add-ons are not allowed. This is banned. You're cheating. The race to world first should represent a level of skill and mastery that comes down to what any player who just uses the game client could do, because that's what the TOS, you know, that's what the DOS defines. If you have to break the TOS in order to win the race to world first, that's no different than somebody exploiting in order to win the race to world first, right? Which, like, that I also think that's an incredibly fair and valid kind of argument.
I think the analogy to go to here is real world sports, right? Like, you know, because things are much looser, right? It's like, yeah, you could, you know, use steroids, blood dope, right? Like there are arguments every once in a while for like, you know, have like, you know, the limiters off Olympics and let people like roid themselves up and like see how far they can push the human body. But like the standards that we have for sports right now are like, you don't do that, and it is cheating to, you know, to use performance enhancing drugs, right? Like,
let's use fucking steroids.
Well, I mean, that's maybe even a question, right? Like, is it cheating in the race world first if you pop an Adderall, right? Like,
that's a good question. I actually don't know, to be honest with you, the answer to that question.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, and do you have to like, you know, and this is a question where it's the. That question, I think the answer has to be no from like an administratability issue, because you can't say you can't pop Adderall unless you have like a prescription and then go and like verify that the person needs this prescription, right? Like, but
honestly,
like,
now I'm just thinking about what the roided up Olympics would look like.
Yeah.
Like there's an extra ethical thing about it being biology.
Oh yeah.
To like you know, if you create an incentive structure for someone to trash their own body in order to win a gold medal, they will do that thing.
That
right?
already happens, right? Like, and without the drugs, right? Like, you know,
yeah.
Very famously, there are a lot of football players who end up, you know, I know this is Twitch, they end up committing suicide because like they have so much brain trauma, and you know, young men slam their heads into each other for years on end still, right? Like, you know,
It's just, do you know the movie Not Another Teen Movie?
No, I'm not super familiar.
Not Another Teen Movie is like scary movie, but for like teen romantic comedies. And there's a subplot about the football player who's gotten 4 concussions, and if he gets a 5th one, he'll die. And he keeps getting wanged in the head by stuff, but he's like, nope, still good, right? Because like, I don't know. I don't even know what it was. I think it was Varsity Blues, maybe. There was just some football movie where a kid dies because he gets a 5th concussion in a row or something like that. But yeah, that is true and also real. I do sort of think I would love to see the roided out speedrunning Olympics, right? Where you say fuck it any percent kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it would be, I think it would last exactly one set of games, because you would see like all the records broken, and then like the back half contestants would like die on the field, right? Like the 100-meter dash, first person sets the world record, you know, 3rd through 5th, like fall over from heart attacks halfway to the end, to the end line, right? Like, you know.
just want to say in the chat, Rachel said, I mean, people shit their pants running marathons, and nobody even pays you to do that shit. But the phrase "that shit" could also mean the individual shit running down their legs. Okay, I'm sorry. I just found that super funny. Okay. The stupid stuff really gets me. Okay, it's all the aspartame rotting my.
Mm.
Okay, what the fuck were we talking about? World of Warcraft.
We were talking about, like, I guess, is it cheating to use add-ons maybe in Final Fantasy 14?
Yeah, I guess Final Fantasy 14 characters. This is shit that they care about. I don't actually know. I mean, like, I'm not an authority on stuff. I just like I watched like 2 YouTube videos on it, and I was like, "Oh, interesting," and then moved on with my life.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's also a question of degrees here, right? Like,
Yeah.
If you use if you like hop over a piece of geometry that you weren't supposed to be able to, but because they like left a corner up, and you like skip some trash, is that cheating, right? Like, if you use it to like trivialize a boss fight, is that cheating? That kind of thing, right? Like, if you like manage to like combine some mechanics, what was the thing for the spider things? Is everybody use like the healing gems for the citrine ring?
Yeah. It like helps trivialize that.
Yeah, and so there's degrees there, right? Like, because I mean, the thing that's been banging around in the back of my head this whole time is like, if they pull all this back, is like WeakAuras 2 going to be like, point your webcam at the screen and we will use computer vision to like, in an overlay to draw where you need to go, right? Like, an overlaying application to try and figure that out for you.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, it becomes a question of like aimbots and shooters or something like that. Like, it's funny that I spent so long doing this. I can't get into I just can't understand the mentality and psychology of a cheater. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just really don't see it. I don't understand who they are and why they do what they do, right? Like the idea that I'm going to sit down at Overwatch or something and use an aimbot in order to win. How does that win have any satisfaction to it? But
yeah, I think there's like levels to it, right? Like, the oldest form of this, right, is like back in the day, old shooters, like zooming down the scope didn't actually like change a lot of like, it didn't actually like decrease your weapon sway. It just kind of like zoomed you in. So you could like tape the crosshair on your monitor, right? And like, is that cheating, right? Like, and so like I agree with you, like if you're using it to kind of like take all skill out of the game, that's one thing, but like if you're using it to kind of like make understanding information that you have access to, it's just maybe a little bit hard to recognize in the heat of what's happening, more understandable, that's close to the line, because that's essentially what DBM is, right? Like, you could listen for the diegetic line, but sometimes that gets lost in the thing. There's stuff flying everywhere, right? Like hearing, frontal, right? Like, makes it crystal clear what's happening. And I think that's much closer to like a line of like, even if it were like banned, like, is that really cheating? I think that's much closer to the line than, it'd be a different thing if like WeakAuras, ran your character out of the frontal cone, right? Like,
yeah, you still have to respond to it. You still personally have to have some level of I don't know, just like capability to make that happen.
Yeah.
I was gonna go somewhere else, but I kind of can't remember where my brain was at. Yeah, I don't know. Add-on stuff.
Yep. I mean, I will say that like they kind of roll it back to like your memorization question from earlier, right? Something that just popped in my head is like some of the more frustrating things I have done in say like a Souls game is like when there's like an ambiguous telegraph and like, it's just like you can't be sure, right? Or like you're looking for like a small tiny tell. It's like that feels more frustrating than fun to me most of the time, right? Like, like in that case, is it like, if they were to say do that in WoW, right? Like, no more cast bars, no more weak auras. You just have to like watch how the boss is moving and determine it based on that. And if like they're not distinct enough, like would I find that more like aggravating than fun? Maybe, right? Like, especially in like a group setting, right, where like everybody has to like make that read at the same time correctly. I can see that being a pain in the butt. But I also think that they probably wouldn't do that, both for technical and just kind of like practical reasons.
Yeah, yeah, that is it's complicated also because like I'm thinking a lot about like what is the decision making that WoW tests me on, right? If I
Yeah.
say, let's say I take the philosophy of the distraction makers guys at its word and I go memorization is bad game design, right? Test of memorization is bad game design. You want tests of decision making. What are the kinds of decisions that I make in WoW ever? WoW is a game that wants to rob you of your decision making. A lot of the time.
Yeah.
You look up your rotation, that's just memorization. You look up your itemization, that's just memorization. I'm not really making decisions about any of that kind of stuff. I'm just putting it in a sim, looking up a tier list of trinkets and popping the best one. Maybe there's like a little bit of that because I have to be good about it. I have to like be smart. Yeah, I like there's some stuff that I feel like I could point to. Maybe this is why I gravitate towards Mythic Plus because this is a big test of decision making, right? Can I pull forward or do we have to finish off this pack, right? Are we in a position who has cooldowns? Are we in a position to keep like ripping? Should I pull big here? Should I pull small? Right? Like these are all decisions and they're decisions made with stakes on a timer, which is great. In raid, I feel like all the decisions I'm being tested on in the raid are tests of memorization.
I think
It's just,
yeah.
can I execute on my memorized rotation sort of well enough?
I mean, that's part of it. I think there's also a matter of like reacting to situations, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you're tagged with the mechanic, can you successfully execute it, right? Like it is an execution test, I think, at some level, right? Like, can I continue to do my rotation while having to deal with this like a particular mechanic? And some of that's memorization, right? Like some of it's fighting memorization, right? Like the number of times I've stunned myself on the in the King Kong fight because like I keep forgetting that I have to look at that bar and make sure I don't hit 100 is embarrassing.
Yeah.
Because I'm just doing my rotation.
Honestly, it's like that one time where I was doing the foot bombs and I just didn't do it. I watched you go. I was like, oh, Mango's getting a bomb. I watched Sarian go, ooh, Sarian's going. I'm up next. And then I just stayed still because I didn't even know why. I like a cooldown came up, just something momentarily like grabbed my attention and I just completely forgot that it was my, it was my job in order to do that.
Brain farts happen, right? But like,
Yeah.
I think
What the fuck up?
Hmm?
Rachel in the chat, I think they call that ADHD, buddy. You know what? Okay.
yeah, and actually, I do kind of want to interrogate this. Have you read?
Okay. Yeah. To read this ridiculous stream of thought, okay. In EverQuest, to sell your stuff on that that game's version of the auction house, you had to stand your character in a place called the Bazaar and open up a shop. But you had to be logged in that spot in order for people to buy your shit. But also, the game would log you out after 15 minutes of inactivity. So, was it cheating when I was a child to use a Lego robot to click the movement keys to make the character turn back and forth to trick the inactivity without being at my PC? Was that cheating?
Well, what's your take, buddy? You have a take?
No, it's complicated. I don't think it represents something that I would consider to be against like the game's sort of rules. Do you know what I mean? And I mostly think that's just because 15 minutes of inactivity is not to like I don't think the game is forcing you to stand there. It's to decrease its server costs. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's why they log you out after 15 minutes.
It's
not like it's good game design for you to sit there at the auction house and be, a character you could buy stuff from.
I think I agree with you. I think it's just like the collision of two different systems rather than is like an intentional thing. So that'd be.
But
my
also at the
opinion.
same time, I find it so compelling to make the case that Lego robot was like an analog cheat bot. You know what I mean? Like instead of downloading a digital program that will do this for you, you use a like a robot to click your like. I just find that really compelling.
Yeah, no,
as an idea.
I would say that's interesting. Like, if you could build a robot to like raid for you, like a physical robot, right? I feel like the general reaction wouldn't be like that's cheating. It would be like, lol, wow, so easy. You could just like program like a robot to do it, right? Like,
I 1000% think I'm going to use the one button rotation sometimes I was thinking about that I was like, is there a version of things where I ever want to do this? And I was like, yeah, in raid all the time.
the thought that immediately popped into my head is like, I wonder how much the raid damage will go up if everybody moves to, if like the bottom half moves to the one button rotation, right? Like,
yeah, because I think the GCD penalty will probably be like half a second or something. It'll go from like a 1.5 second GCD to like a 2 second GCD or something. Like that'll be the penalty.
That's too. I think that's like
it'll be
that's
something
harsh.
like that.
Yeah, I guess you have to make it that harsh to keep people from doing it, right? Like,
it's not that. Well, I guess it is sort of. I guess that's wow. That is actually pretty harsh when I do think about it. Okay, that is giving yourself negative 33% haste if you think about it.
yeah,
Right. Which is pretty brutal. That is pretty brutal. But it's gonna be something like that. You know what I mean? Maybe it won't be half a second. Maybe it'll be a quarter of a second or something, and that's mathematically significant because you don't need to do much more probably than like 10 or 15% kind of malice in order to make it non-competitive fundamentally.
yeah,
But
yeah. I wonder what they're going to
people,
balance it for, right? Like, I wonder if it's like, are they going to balance it for like, if everybody in the raid is doing it, you can't beat heroic, you can't beat normal,
I think the algorithm will also be bad is the other thing. Like I don't think the algorithm is going to be smart enough to do some stuff. Like there's just some low level stuff that I feel like happens on a rotational level that the algorithm won't be able to pick up on. And like this is what I expect. I expect that the algorithm is going to give you kind of not even like it wouldn't even be raid viable in the first place kind of rotation. Maybe like normal or LFR or something like that, right? But my bet is that if you look up what the algorithm is telling you to do, it's just going to be a much more basic, much simpler version of something that on Wowhead would be 10 or 15 steps that you have to sort of like memorize. And that's going to actually represent quite a lot just in and of itself, right? It's not even just that there is the GCD penalty. It's that there's the GCD penalty like plus.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I like the way I'm imagining this happening, and maybe this is, not correct, but like, if you could have like a one button rotation for like a lot of your stuff, and then like you manually trigger your cooldowns, at least you're like, maybe they leave you to manually trigger your major cooldowns. Maybe they just like, leave your defensive cooldowns, never trigger it themselves, or like they only trigger at like, low health or something, right? Like having one button rotation for some basic stuff and then like letting the player choose when to do big flashy things. I actually think would be like a pretty good kind of like scale your way into like, high level rotation stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if they're thinking about that, but that's the first thing that popped into my mind is right. Like, just keep hitting this button, and you'll, in my case, you will Tiger Palm, you will Rising Sun Kick, you will, Fist of Fury on cooldown, you will Spinning Dragon Kick if you have that talented, you will Fist of the Windlord, Strike of the Windlord if you can do that. But like Earth, Wind, and Fire. Zuin, Tiger, and like, what's it, the Serenity Burst thing that, the hero tree has now. Those are all things you manually trigger, and also your defensive are manually triggered, like Touch of Karma or whatever. if like, because one of the things they described is like, letting people play their alts without having to like, lose their minds on it, right? Like, that's something that might actually get me to play an alt, right? Like, I don't know my rotation for Beauregard, even though I find him interesting and I like learn about half of it every time I need to level him up, and then I promptly forget all of it. And as a result, I never bring him even to like, alt raids because I just don't know how to play him and I don't want to have not fun. I don't want to like spend, an hour learning that before the actual raid. So I'll just, try and like hit high scores on Billabong. So something like that I think would be useful at least. I'd be in favor of that.
Yeah, I find that a pretty compelling argument, I think.
This will fall apart though if like, you know, Mythic Raiding Guild discovers that if they all take, Marksman Hunter and just like slam on the spacebar, they can get through like the first 3 bosses. They just have to have like, oh no, you know what I'm seeing? I'm seeing it now. It's like, there's some nerd sitting at his computer, and on one screen it's like a Death Knight that he's manually controlling. The other screen is like 40 multi-boxed Marksman Hunters, and he's just like slamming, like pressing a pedal with his foot to like do the Marksman Hunters, and then manually controlling the Death Knight. That's what's gonna happen. It'll be
What's interesting? This functionality is going to make multiboxing insanely easy. Because multiboxing right now, you'd kind of have to multibox a couple of things that are all the same thing, right? Like it'll be like 5 balance truths. You'll see like 5 balance truths multiboxing. For the 1-button rotation, it means that you could have multi-box of whatever, and the 1-button rotation will just take care of you. Like as long as you guys can all target the same thing, the 1-button rotation is kind of all you need.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know what I bet? It's not going to be like super viable, but I bet you there will be like some obscure competition, like what level of M plus can you get to multi-boxing solo, right? Like,
yeah. True.
yeah. All right.
That's maybe to the end of it. I don't know. I feel like we've dragged this out enough. Is there anything else you wanna hit on when it add on
No,
stuff?
I just it's gonna be all super implementation specific, and like my guess is that the first time they try it, they're gonna get it wrong and won't roll it back within hours, and then like 3 months later they're gonna get it mostly right, and then like 6 months later it'll be good, right? Like
Yeah. Okay. Well, how was your week?
It was good as 2 weeks at this point because I had
That's true.
I had to get out of Dodge. What? I have abandoned blueprints. I have decided it is too frustrating to actually be worth it. Like it's just too RNG dependent, and I actually don't find it that compelling or innovative, right? Like I think it's a cool game.
Wow. Really?
Like it is a cool game, but basically what it asks you to do is like there's too much like running the game over and over to get like the right combinations, and like I also find fundamentally the exercise of strategically playing the house to like there is a way to play the game to maybe get the house that you want by like draining the pool of blueprints in a way that like maximizes your success rate, and I just don't care enough to do that, right? Like like theoretically you could what your pool of blueprints are. Is like, okay, if I strategically choose them, then I can like push that, kind of hopefully guarantee that I'll pull the right kind of rooms to get out. But like the problem is that I don't want to do that, right? Like this is actually exactly the reason why I don't find chess compelling, because this maybe gets back to our discussion about memorization. I don't like chess because I don't find it interesting to memorize 7,000 openings, right? Like and play that way, right? Like I once I found out that like solving a Rubik's Cube was mostly algorithmic, I just like stopped caring immediately and like never picked up a Rubik's Cube again.
But like, what about like mid-tier chess? Like, if you and I played chess against each other, do you think that would be interesting? Just because neither of us are at that point, right? Like,
Oh
and
yeah,
that's my philosophy about something like chess, right? That when you suck at it, the decision making matters.
yeah. No, I mean this can go into our discussions about like Commander, right? Like this is like,
Yeah.
you know, I usually fall off of Magic when like there are periods of time where I will play like tons of I'll play tons of Magic, and usually the time I fall off is like when what I'm like all I am doing is like running the same deck over and over again to the point where it's like like that you're like the joy for me is in like the kind of like moment to moment decision making, and the moment it becomes this is the right decision, like I can calculate the right decision and just execute on it, it stops being an interesting game for me. um uh
I was famously the champion of the chess club in 4th grade. Yeah, I don't know. My dad, I actually quite liked chess when my dad and I were playing it all the time. There's this like while where I was in, I don't know, like 5th, 6th, 7th grade where my dad and I were just playing chess all the time. And it was great because we developed this kind of a meta against each other. Like he really likes using knights. His thing was knight tricks. He likes to do knight tricks where knights go into unexpected places to force like complicated trades. And my thing was rooks. I really like rooks because they're just like big and beefy and they can crush the board. So I trade really aggressively to open the board up to get to rooks, and he does these knight tricks, and so we kind of developed our own little meta game. But that was also when I was an adolescent child. So
yeah. No, I mean I never quite got there, just mostly because like I again it's one of those things where like I think I took a book out of the library on chess, and it was just like lists of like moves, and I was like, oh, I don't care. And not that I never played chess again, it's like never stopped trying to get good at it, right? Like um uh and so like yeah, I think I'd have fun playing mid-level chess, but I also like I don't think I'm mid-level at chess anymore, just because like I don't play that often in the first place. um
yeah, I
yeah.
also don't even know. Like, I also think there's like the time component, which is kind of interesting about chess, like speed chess, putting a clock into chess. When do you use your time to think through decisions? When do you just like grip it and rip it? Is kind of an interesting kind of angle to chess. But I basically think chess is a dumb game, also probably. If
Yeah,
you
I mean
put a gun to my head and
I don't want to call it a dumb game. It's just one I'm not interested in playing. Right? Like I think speed solving Rubik's cubes are neat. I'm not interested in doing that. I will watch summoning salt videos all day long. I cannot get myself to actually like try and speed run a thing. Right? Like um
yeah, I get that for sure.
yeah. This is why I fall off with some of these like PvE shooters. Like
Mhm.
at a point, it's like I can like you can get me on board to like do the perfect execution like a handful of times, but like after a while, it's kind of like I don't want to do the same shit again, right? Like, um,
Yeah, like all of the interesting decisions get made early on when you're learning and you start making choices about how you want to approach stuff. But then you get to the point where, well, actually, the best decision is for someone to just sit on the drill and fix it. And
yeah,
it's like, and that person never does.
yeah. Well, that's a different problem, right? Like,
Yeah. Did you ever play Payday 3?
no,
Payday 3 was great for the group stealth stuff, was really sweet and interesting. Because every map in Payday 3 had both stealth and kind of like active sort of modes. And so a group stealth game is much more interesting than you might expect. Because it's about stuff like you have one person who is watching the guard communicating to the other person on the other side of a door that the guard is like walking by. It's like, now, not now, no, not yet, go. Right? Like that kind of thing is interesting, and it's not interesting in a long-term way. It's not all that replayable, but like the process of decoding the stealth puzzle and getting it so that you can steal the item, right, like is what's so satisfying about it.
no, I can imagine that. I actually think I'd want a game where like not only is like where you can go stealth and then like actually going hot after that is viable, right? Like one of the least favorite times I played Payday 2 with you was when we kept restarting that one mission to try and do it the stealth way, right? Like that's just like I don't care. It's just like, fucking play it through, like go
We
hot.
did technically get to that point at a certain point when we were playing Payday, because They kind of got rid of the detection meter thing. You know, the old in Payday 2, if you carried a bunch of gear into the thing, it was really easy to be detected. So you needed to just like wear your suit and nothing else, right? In Payday 3, they got rid of all of that stuff, and so it was actually easier to transition from quiet to loud. Yeah, exactly. And there are definitely a number of times where we got most of the way through on stealth, and then we fucked something up, and we were just like, you know what, fuck it, just blow the drill, like let's go. And we finished the mission out by going hot, and it actually was kind of nice because the stealth portion bypassed a bunch of the gating. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you have to wait 180 seconds for the door to be hacked. It's like, well, you didn't do that because during the stealth portion you got the key card off the manager and blooped into the back. And so yes, you do have to wait the 180 seconds in order to drill the vault or something stupid like that. But like at the end of the day, that just like wasn't an issue.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's good design, right?
Yep. Too bad that game never took off, even though I pay light attention to it all the time. And I think it's getting a big update at like the end of, at the end of May, but it just had such a bad launch that, what are you going to do?
Is it a different team than the guys that did Payday 2?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I guess, well, the face of it is the same. It's this guy named Almir, who's been that guy. He was that guy in Payday 2. He's this guy in Payday 3. But I don't know who that guy is and what he represents. And so, yeah.
There's a thing pinging in my head that, like, the people behind Payday 2 are doing their own independent game or something, and maybe I'm wrong about that.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Obviously, I loved Payday 2, but I probably do think Payday 3 was better designed. I don't know. I like Payday 2 a lot.
I know, buddy. What else? Honestly, so what I've been doing most of this week is my WoW chores, and I've been trying to beat the underpin on question mark, and it's been taking me a lot of effort, and a lot of this is just kind of like I am too impatient, and like this is what kills me in like the Dark Souls games all the time is like I'll be like, oh, I can go for another hit, and then like I get hit by like the one shot, and that is happening to me all the time in this underpin fight, and it's driving me nuts.
I have not fought the underpin. It took me only a tiny bit of time to kill Zekvir question mark, but
yeah.
Honestly, at this point, I just wait until the very end of the season when I am at the apex of my power. This is an interesting thing to talk about, though. Did you read the news about the dinars?
No, I didn't.
Ooh, people are mad about them. Yeah, so the dinars are coming in patch 11.1.7 or something. No, actually, it is coming in this patch now that I think about it. The thing with the dinars is, the dinars drop gear for the different tracks, but you can't get myth track gear from the raid unless you have downed the mythic boss, which basically makes them worthless for everybody. Unless you are getting the heroic version of something, which maybe will be valuable for people. It's kind of unclear whether or not like the heroic version is going to make a difference. So you get the heroic, whatever it is, like Jaster Diamond or something like that, because it'll outscale sort of a mythic one. But there are a lot of players who are very mad that they're getting mythic track gear out of the dinar system, which the arguments I find to be pretty interesting all around, even if I am generally with the haters on this one.
So explain this to me because I'm not quite. When would the when would
it's Dragonflight Season 4.
Okay.
Here's how the dinars work. The dinars get you a piece of gear at the very bottom of the totem pole. Okay. The lowest you get a gear, you get like a imagine you get your best in slot weapon, but that best in slot weapon is like I think it was like 1 out of 14 or 1 out of 16 or something like that on the track, which I think was LFR level. Like you get it at the bottom of LFR, but you can just use Valor Stones and Crests to pump it all the way up to the top of Mythic if you want. What they have done is they have said, okay, well, you can't do that anymore, but you can buy the heroic or mythic track version of the item, but you can only get the mythic track version of the item if you have killed the mythic boss. So if you kill the mythic boss of the thing, you get the mythic track version of that item. Otherwise, get fucked kind of thing. Mythic Plus gear was not originally on the thing, but they announced today that Mythic Plus gear is going to be on there. There's a lot of trinkets that are Mythic Plus only that are like, and in order to get Mythic Track Mythic Plus gear, you need to get all 12s timed, which is hard. I've done it. Like we just did it last week. It took us, however many weeks into the season we are, 8 weeks into the season in order to get there. But that's like theoretically kind of the break point of Mythic. But if you're a Mythic Plus player like me, you don't have access to Mythic raid gear that is theoretically your BIS. So people are mad about all of that stuff.
I see. Yeah. I don't know. I don't care that much. I probably use it for Mog, right? Like,
I think I am also going to end up using it for Mog. I don't know. We'll see. The other thing that they're doing, which I think is pretty interesting, is cap. So mythic pieces will be able to go up 2 additional item levels, and heroic pieces will be able to go up 2 additional item levels. So heroic will kind of become like mythic, and mythic will become even higher. But the thing that's complicated is we don't know whether it will be retroactive or not. So I've been pulling mythic pieces of gear out of the vault all season, but mythic plus characters, man, it is so complicated that this shit is all called mythic. Mythic plus players are only getting mythic track gear out of the vault. So I have 1 piece of mythic track gear per week that I've been doing 10s or higher. And there are some weeks where we whiffed, so I probably have like 5 or 6 pieces of mythic gear, but like not whatever. And if it's not retroactive, then it is going to mean that I'm kind of gearing from 0 again, which is sort of bullshit, and I would be mad about it. But who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, that makes sense. That sounds like to me like I will go and get a weapon and pump that up to 2 above heroic and not anything else, right? Like especially are we getting a 3rd raid in War Within?
Definitely. The next patch, we're going to Koresh. We're gonna do some Ethereal's raid. Question is, are we gonna kill Xalatath? Who knows?
Okay, and then do we have anything information about Midnight? Are we gonna find out next week at like Blizz Fair or whatever?
A lot of housing stuff.
Okay.
Do you pay attention to any of the housing?
I saw.
Do you think housing is going to be something you're going to be into?
My guess is not, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Housing looks amazing. They have put out 3 or 4 blogs at this point about the different housing sort of rules and mechanics. But the thing about it just seems as though they're doing the best, like the best stuff sort of possible when it comes to housing. It's evergreen, your housing sort of like inventory. There are 2 different kind of modes. There's basic mode where things kind of snap in place, but there's also advanced mode, and advanced mode you can turn off clipping and you can do really funky stuff. So like they showed off how somebody used a bush by putting the bush clipped outside of the room, just on the edge of the room, and it just kind of put like a wall of ivy. They just used this bush asset with its clipping off to do this like wall of issue thing. Or so it's like, oh, that's cool,
yeah,
right?
No, actually, that's got me way in. Like one of my favorite things to do back in like, there's like make Halo 2 icons that were unique by like having different patterns using the same color, so that because like there wasn't a border on them, so you'd get like funny looking things because you'd use it to like strategically clip parts. But yeah, that sounds awesome.
They have talked about how it's like an evergreen thing. So one of the things that they're doing is they're adding a ton of old. There's no new profession. It all keys into old professions, right? Like inscription or whatever. But if you want a Pandarian scroll, you will have to go to a scribe who doesn't have War Within inscription, but a scribe who has Pandaria inscription. So there's this kind of like old world nature of it where, like they're going to, if you have been leveling up your professions like engineering 6 or 7 expansions, you're now going to have like a use for whatever and like have a reason to go like farm kind of like old stuff in order to do. Some of it's going to be buyable on the auction. It's not going to be you can get plots in like a neighborhood and it's all instanced. So basically probably all of us will get a neighborhood together and plop our houses down and we can go in there and see each other and all.
I would say, are there guild neighborhoods? Because like that's I think the the big thing, right? Like, if I can build it in a way that, like, everybody in the guild is just kind of around and we can, like, admire each other's stuff, that will go a long way in, like, bringing me towards it. Whereas if it's like, you can visit my house if I invite you over, right? Like, and that's it. It's like, okay, then I'm not gonna care, right? Like,
Yeah, it's not guild neighborhoods. It is friend neighborhoods, is my understanding. So I don't understand how this works, but the idea is that you can be in a neighborhood with you can just be in a neighborhood with your friends. It doesn't have to be your guild. So if you want to have a house with, like some like Low Kicks, for instance, is not in the Honorborn, but like he's part of the friend group. He will probably have a house that's like with our houses, right? Which is very cool. So we'll see.
well, do you only have one house?
No, you can get multiple.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, and can you copy paste your house, right? Like
That's interesting. No. Well, maybe. Well, no, I don't think so. So the thing that each house is sort of like, okay, I buy a plot on Bairn. I can use it on all of my other characters, and they can all have their own unique versions of that house, I think. But you need multiple items. They explain this thing of like, if you want the same chair in two houses, you have to buy two chairs.
okay.
Or like if you use your one chair in house one, you also have to use it in house two, which makes me think copy pasting isn't really a thing. But like also, I don't know, it's complicated.
Yeah, because like I could also see, like, you want two chairs in your one house, you need to get two copies of the chair, but like, you are active in two different groups, right? Like you've got like Patrick's server and you've got, the Underborn. It would make sense to me if you were that kind of person that you just want to like be able to like, have the same house in both places essentially, right? So you could share it with both groups of people and not have to worry about duplicating it across it, but who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, so I don't know. They keep announcing housing stuff. They haven't announced anything else about Midnight. We'll see. I guess they are doing BlizzCon next year, but not this year. So
There's also like a Blizz celebration in a week at PAX. So
yeah, that's true. Which I'm not going to. I did not get tickets. Fuck me. Okay, that's what we say to that.
just stand outside and scream, "Chris Metzen, please!"
Yeah. I don't know what else is going on. Hey.
Oh, Delph got autobotted. There we go.
If any of you chuckle fucks builds an ugly house next to mine, I'll kill you with my own hands.
I see like Autobot. I'm like, is this his favorite? No, it's just like, I'll kill you highlighted in red.
What'd you think of Heretic Hero? We played D&D last week. And by the last week, you mean what, 3 days ago? Fuck.
Yes.
It feels like it's been 1,000 years.
The orthodoxy. No, I've been having a blast, right? Like it's, right combination of aspects.
I'm so glad. I cannot believe I forgot. So for folks at home, I introduced this mechanic called pentabands. The pentabands are sort of like an invisible chain that forces the party to all be together. The rule is every member of the party has to be within 30 feet of one other member of the party. So you can have like a long strung out chain, or you can all be clumped or whatever, but you can't have people breaking away from each other, which I thought was like, I was like, oh, this is going to be such an interesting mechanic. And then I forgot about it in like the first combat we ran. I didn't include the pentabands. Or I guess technically the second the second combat we ran. I was a little surprised that you guys didn't stick around to fight the Revenant more. But you took me at my word that they are tough, and it was in fact tough, I guess.
I mean, at least for me, when people were rolling fairly high and like not hitting, I'm like, oh, we need to leave, right? Like,
Yeah. Honestly, Myrtle hit it quite often. It took more damage than I was expecting. But I don't know. They are beefcakes, I guess.
I would say Merle was also rolling high, right? And like that's like not a thing you can rely on, right? Like
true. Yep.
How are you enjoying running it?
I am really enjoying it. It's funny because I have a lot of I'm getting more and more faith in kind of characters, not just your characters, but just players in general, to figure stuff out. I used to describe this a long time ago, probably if like 3 years ago on the podcast, there's some quote of me where I said, sometimes I design problems that I don't have a solution for. And I just ask players to figure it the fuck out, right? And I was probably describing maybe 30% of the time, right? 70% of the time, I design, locks with keys, right? Oh, this is the thing. But if you do this other thing, the players will solve the issue. I very rarely do that ever anymore. I basically am always just sort of trusting that you guys will figure this shit the fuck out. And mostly what I'm designing, I feel like, is kind of an interesting and emergent set of mechanics that you just have to think. You just have to think about. And I don't even have a solution in my. I don't have a solution in my brain. There's some stuff like that. Like, so for instance, I knew that when you freed Raylana, you wouldn't have to do a chase sequence, right? Like, if you had chosen to just run past her, that revenant would have chased you down and you could have gotten kind of owned in that sort of scenario. But because you freed her, the sort of bonus objective of, can you free this prisoner who is trapped and gonna die, right? You just kind of got to auto succeed at that, like, sort of follow-up skill challenge, whatever that would have looked like, kind of thing. And so there's like a little bit of that sort of stuff, but like the core of how the revenants work, I didn't know that Sarian had liberating step or whatever. It's not like I designed that net mechanic for him, but it's perfect for it. So when he was like, oh, I do this thing to give Merle a save to get out of the net, I was like, that's amazing. The point of the revenant net was to hold you guys down in danger with the revenants, so that one member of the party, obviously I forgot the pentabands at first, so that one member of the party could be locked with the thing and nobody can move out, because that person is still connected to you via the pentabands. You have to go figure out a way to help this guy out. But liberating step was such a beautiful solution to that, and I was fuck, it was awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like that also feels like the most satisfying, right? It's like, I have a solution to this problem, and in a way that, like, isn't because the GM set up this domino for me to knock over, right? Like, even though, it's not something you could have necessarily anticipated, just kind of like it feels good to like have a tool, turn the screw on the right screwdriver for the right screw type of deal.
Yeah. I actually also like that. I've been thinking a lot more about the concept of the GM also plays the game. This is something that's been on my mind for a long time. Maybe 7th Expedition put me in this place, where I kind of used to see the role of the GM as a little more powerful than I do now, but now I also think of myself as playing the game alongside the players. I have more power than the players. I can edit rules and I can do stuff and I can grant. I don't really think about editing rules all that much, but I think about granting exceptions constantly, right? So for instance, the idea, there's this thing where like somebody failed a stealth check to not get hit by a spotlight, but I was like, you could dive out of the way of that, I'll give you a reflex save, kind of thing, right? Like, that's sort of granting an exception to the otherwise crafted sort of mechanics of, there are these watchtowers and when you trigger line of sight you have to roll a stealth check on them, kind of thing. But like, that sort of thing is a small, it's a very like small editing of the rules rather than taking a sledgehammer to the rules, which is, sort of like how I was thinking about the game a long time ago. There were just like entire rules or game systems that I didn't like, and I would just completely crash them open in order to solve those problems. And I guess I still do some of that stuff with like artifacts or whatever else, but
yeah, I
know,
mean,
in general,
it feels like most of what you do is like add new resolution systems on top of things, which is like, I think well within kind of normal parameters, right? Like,
yeah.
The what was I gonna say? The thing that, or rather, I don't know. I've been super enjoying the way things have been playing out. That's the thing. Like, there's also like little things that, like, I feel like I'm in a weird position where like I am the person who knows the rules the best, and so like I'm also in the position to like ruin somebody's fun. And like, I think for the first time I like pulled a punch. I messaged you and I don't know if you saw it, but like, Randy,
Oh,
right?
I remember this. Yeah.
Randy like went to shove someone with his shield, and like by Raw you're not allowed to do that. Like, and I was like, that doesn't sound right. There's got to be like, I feel like there's got to be a way to do that. I went and looked it up. Apparently, you need a free hand to shove. I don't know if you remember, but I asked if he was using a buckler because like the buckler you count as having a free hand, right? Like, if it's not raised. And so I just like kept my mouth shut and messaged that to you because I also don't think that's like an unreasonable thing to do. But I didn't.
I like that is the kind of like in exception granting, it is the kind of exception I would want to, to grant. I also feel like in most scenarios, I'm pretty like I did this for Rachel, obviously. I was looking at archetypes and didn't find one that felt sort of good. And so, I messaged like our group chat about it. I got pointed in a couple of different directions by like Mark and Nick, and I saw some stuff that I liked. And I basically was like, okay, I know what I'm going to do for this. I wrote a custom dedication feat. The complicated thing about like writing a custom archetype is I didn't want to write out a whole feat list myself. You know what I mean? But the thing I was thinking is I was like, oh, here's what I'll do. I will write a custom dedication feat. So taking the archetype gives you the dedication feat. That dedication feat is very unique. And then I'm going to import a couple of different feat chains-ish from some of these archetypes, but then reflavor them to be for the thing, right? Like, so it is mechanically the same feat as what is in the or whatever it was called. Maybe it was Warlord. Maybe it was Marshall or something like that. Like mechanically, it's the same thing. Yeah, it's mechanically the same thing that's in Marshall, but I'm going to call it something different. It's going to have a little bit of a different functionality, but basically it is, how can a charismatic leader represent themselves in combat? If you want to take combat feats for this, sure, okay, I will pull some of these from sort of Marshall, but not all of them, right? And the same thing for a couple of the other ones, just to kind of capture this idea of what a cult master of not Slanesh, a cult master of Soreth would look like.
What did you change about Marshall? I'm curious. Or what did you write for dedication?
What I was looking for was I was like, this type should have stuff that interacts with sort of just social checks, right? Where you are doing social stuff. So that stuff comes from Dandy. Then there is some stuff for, okay, you should also be a cult master who can be like a combat, like let's say I'm a cult master of Soreth, and I want to chase down combat effectiveness, where I'm a leader in combat using my face skills to lead. Cool, Marshall has that. Which I think are the stances is the thing that I lifted from there.
Okay.
And then there was also some stuff from Grey Gardener, which is a very specific archetype that's about like hooded vigilante sort of, like stuff. And
that's a very like Galarian specific.
Yeah. But it captures the nature of the cult that I want to sort of use. That was a little more inspiration. I'm not quite lifting stuff direct from there. But the feat list for the Slanesh cultist is way more horny. Yeah, that's true. Listen, the heresy is sword in the balls, okay?
What is so very finally, I'm curious, but what is the dedication for
let's see, what did I write? Do I have it up over here somewhere on my screen? Cult Master of Soreth, the dedication feat. You've chosen to become a cult master of Soreth, building your own following by relying on your personality. You get to choose deception, diplomacy, intimidation. You become trained in that skill or expert. This is actually kind of a nerf compared to some of the other ones. In addition, you can now take the evangelize activity during downtime. When you evangelize, you roll a skill check using the above skill. You either are deceiving and manipulating people into becoming followers, you are browbeating them, striking fear, being a demagogue, or you're being empathetic and persuasive. Right, the three different ways to become to gain followers. The DM sets the DC given the circumstances of your current location. So obviously, if you walk into a big city with not a lot of people, you could convert quite a lot of followers quite quickly, right? And you just roll a certain amount in order to get followers. So if you evangelize, you get a critical success, it's 2d6. A regular success is 1d6. And then when you've gathered 25 followers, you establish a cult. And that is the condition that triggers some feats down the line in kind of this Grey Gardener sort of sense of things. So the idea is if you want to do this and then become really persuasive in kind of the exploration phase where you're talking to people, right? You take these dandy feats, right? If you want to become really martial, you're leading the charge, you are using whatever. Okay, great. You take the martial stances or whatever. And then if you want to do just kind of like secret, I'm running a cult stuff, that is the stuff that's inspired by the Grey Gardener.
Interesting, because like that's a lot more choice than most archetypes give you, right? Like there's a reason you're taking from 3 different archetypes, right? Because like most of the time you're making that choice at the dedication stage, right? Like, you know, if you want to be the military thing, you take the martial dedication. If you want to be the social thing, you take the dandy dedication, right?
Oh,
Like,
interesting.
yeah,
I see what you're saying. Like I'm great. I'm only taking a couple of feats from each, but
No, no.
the flexibility is what you're getting.
yeah,
at
yeah,
there?
yeah. I'm not
Yeah, okay.
criticizing. I'm just pointing out that that's like, you know, it's a difference in like there's nothing that gives you that much that much choice, right? Like most archetypes have 1 or 2 choices at most, at any given level, and you can't take a second archetype dedication until you've taken at least 2 feats in the first one, which is to prevent, you know, multi-classing nonsense that you used to get in the older games. I'm not saying it like I dislike it. I just, you know, it's just an interesting way to go with it. Also,
Yeah, in my mind, I was thinking combat, exploration, downtime, and so I was trying to solve for what are the things, because it seemed as though there were a couple of different ones, right? The dandy has some stuff where it's like it gives you this activity in downtime, but it also gives you this activity in, you know, like you can now do, I don't know, whatever, right? And so
part of the problem is like the dandy is one of these archetypes that like is a little like feels like it's not meant to be taken in most cases, right? Like you're never gonna put dandy in like, you know, in like a power, you know, a power gamer build, because it's like it's like a very skilly kind of build thing,
and like if you're just in a hardcore dungeon crawler game, right, where you guys are playing, you know, listen, you're playing the Tomb Hunters of
Tomb of Elemental
Quorum,
Evil.
and yeah, exactly. All you're doing is dungeon delving. Like, what the fuck are you doing, dandy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's all super super neat. Yeah, no, huh. That's a pretty cool way to do it. I give my thumbs up to that. You do. Oh, that was the thing I was gonna say. Evangelize is a master level diplomacy feat, so
yeah.
I mean,
maybe
it does
I
something.
will take a look at that. Yeah.
It makes your target stupefied. It's like a combat trick. Not so it doesn't really matter for practice. It's just kind of like a, you know, a name collision thing, right? Like, but yeah, yeah. No, I've been super enjoying Heretic Heroes. It's a good
Heretic
time.
Heroes is also unique because it is one that's so insanely player driven. Like when I was thinking about, it's funny because this was not the one I expected you guys to pick. Obviously, when I was thinking about the different kind of path ones, there were some that are a little bit more scripted than others. Like when I described Fangs of Our Fathers, that was pretty scripted, at least at first. And then it kind of opens up and you get some real sort of like choices, right? Kovalgrad is also kind of scripted. But like Heretic Heroes this is the predicament. There's a bunch of aspects to it. You got to you figure it out on your own. But I don't want to say I was mad about it. It just wasn't the one that I expected you to pick, and it was the one I sort of did the least amount of prep for. I had the idea of the beacon. The beacon was always, it was like, oh, they go to this prison. The prison is defined by they're killing these ghosts at the beacon, and I already knew, you know, I know all the secrets of the beacon and everything else like that. But there was a lot of all the extra stuff, the pentabands. I designed all that kind of after we ended up picking it. So.
Delps, I love being frenemies with Mango. Yeah, I do actually enjoy that kind of like push and pull, right? That
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's been a great handful of sessions. I'm excited to keep playing.
Okay.
Yeah. Oof. I do wish we had like I know it's like, you know, Mondays, and people have work, but I you know, I'm used to like the 4-hour sessions that I play with my other group. It's like I wish we had a 4th hour to play, because it's so, like, you know.
I also feel that I was thinking that about combat stuff. You know, one of the issues that I found with Hell's Rebels going on is Hell's Rebels had this first adventuring day problem where it was a pretty downtime heavy thing. And because I was designing most of the sessions as discrete kind of episodic units, right? Basically everybody went into every combat, blew all of their per day stuff like right off the rip, because they're gonna do, it's, you know, combat's gonna be 3 rounds or something like that. So you blow all of your highest level spell slots, like crushing everything. And then there's nothing really to test past that. There's actually a problem that I'm having in 7th Expedition, to be honest with you. And I think this is just like an issue that I have to suck it up, and is the nature of kind of like the way the game is designed. But Heretic Heroes is nice because people are using the physical papers. I feel better about saying, like, track your shit day to day, right? When, you know, we did essentially 2 combats back to back over the course of 2 sessions, it felt much better on paper because it wasn't like asking someone to remember the stuff that they had entered into their computer without resetting or whatever. That was like a constant thing in Roll20. And so that felt pretty good.
Oh, see, I really like Foundry because it tracks that for you, right? Like, it, you know, and combat will get long. That is like a weakness of the system, is like, you know, you have to be on your ball. Like, you know, I have had, like, at the end of this campaign that we just finished out, I had multiple kind of like, we had multiple multi-session combats, right? Like, you know, 8 hours of combat, like 8 hours of real time for, like, you know, a 6-round combat. It was, granted, it was like a, you know, an over-spec combat, but, like, you know, that's just like how it goes sometimes. Delph says, I'm going to be honest, after a few sessions in Heretic Heroes, I'm considering just printing a physical sheet for 7th Expedition. I mean, there's something to the paper, right? Like, I like the paper. Yep. I've been having,
I definitely think that's true.
That. Yeah.
It's funny because Heretic Heroes, you know, I got to design that for paper. For 7th Expedition, I designed that entirely online. I want to, like, it's the kind of thing where I want to show it, but I would never be able to because it would ruin it. I am so secretive about the map for the continent, because the moment anyone sees it, it ruins the kind of mystique. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I know exactly what you mean. The Angry GM talks about, like, he's got a concept that he calls, like, the everything stat, right? Which is essentially kind of like a skill challenge-esque things. He does it like skill challenges, but the way he does it is he, like, runs a scenario, and in his head, he has, like, a, you know, like, if they get here, they win, and if they get here, they lose, but he never tells the players about it, right? Like, you know, it's a way for him to internally track that status, but, like, externally, if you let the players know, it, like, takes them out of, like, the verisimilitude of the system, right? Like,
that's true. That's actually how I do. If you guys hadn't rescued, it's not quite a skill challenge, but the idea is, if you're running, you get off the board, and I track who gets off the board when, because it matters for essentially like initiative and stuff like that, and also some kind of like advantages. And it's like, can you outrun chasing enemies, right? Like, they are coming after you, and then at that point, it's just a matter of skill checks, right? And if you, it's honestly a pretty ad hoc kind of thing, but we do it in 7th Expedition all the time, because there have just been good opportunities where, like, the party gets ambushed, and rather than fight, they are going to flee. And so the whole combat is, can I get to the edge of the map and walk off and do it quickly enough that I'm not, like, hamstringing us in sort of that fleeing. And what I ask people to do is, like, okay, well, now you're running through the forest. What are the skill checks you use to put yourself ahead? And so somebody might go, oh, well, I use nature check to run them into a beehive, or I use, you know, the simple ones, acrobatics to parkour through a dense thing of foliage, right? Like that kind of stuff to sort of adjudicate what it's like to kind of escape a combat.
Okay, and is that narrative control how you keep it from being, like, you know, like, I imagine the issue there is that, like, at some point you don't really have a lot of, like, choice. Like, it is not skillful to roll a die, right? Like, you know, it's not testing player skill to roll a die, right? Like, you know, the way that I
set different DCs based on what they describe.
Okay. So that narrative,
if somebody goes, yeah, I guess so. If somebody goes, I use my athletics to run fast, like, that has a higher DC than if somebody describes something like interesting or creative, right? Like,
okay.
I don't know. I don't even know what an interesting or creative thing would be off the top of my head, but players do it all the time. And that's when you go, and it's also a lot of, like, weird skills in order to do stuff, right? Like, oh, I use survival to really quickly grab a vine and tie it around a tree to trip them. It's like, great, that's an amazing idea. I would love, like, that's going to get the DC of 12. The athletics check is going to get the DC of 15 or something.
That makes sense. Yeah, that like I feel like that's like the hardest thing to do, especially like in the pre-written skill chase is just kind of like, well, roll an athletics check 4 times in a row, and if you roll the number high enough, you win. And it's like that's not anything, right? It's just kind of like,
Yeah. And the other one is if it goes multiple rounds, which it sometimes does. If it goes multiple rounds, they can't use the same skill check twice.
Okay, that makes sense. Although I feel like there is a danger there of kind of like, let me see how to shoehorn my second highest skill into this.
Yeah, well, that's the Rufus the Red problem. Like Rufus the Red is going to solve every problem with acrobatics if you let him.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we got
Hey, do you remember the Blood King?
Oh.
They learned about the Blood King this week in 7th Expedition.
the Blood King.
From HPPG.
No. Remind me.
Were you there? Do you remember Colonel Steelbrand?
Which game is this?
This was, I don't know, just one of the. I ran a game where there was a human mercenary colonel who gave you the task of going to kill some goblins. And when you killed the goblins, you discovered that he was paying the goblins to attack so that he could. It was military industrial complex stuff. To reap, super expensive mercenary contracts.
Does
this ring a bell at all?
4E airship game?
No, this was on Friday nights for HPPG.
No. The 4E airship game was on Friday night. Like it was.
Oh, it was?
I think we only played like 1 or 2 sessions of this, right? Like because I think there was a game with like I think it was Gondor. No, not Gondor. Gondor would have been a magician. It would have been. It was one of your ranger characters was like the Ruprecht, maybe.
Oh, that one was for it was not that game. I know that game. That was the one where you killed him, or no, you didn't kill him. You killed someone, and there were the soul of the forest.
Yes,
and it killed the whole forest. Right. That was the Green Reach, actually. Yeah, this is all like very proto stuff. The Blood King was a semester long campaign that I ran for HPPG, where they went to the tomb of the Blood King. This like tomb. It was sort of proto 7th Expedition. Actually, it was you go to the new continent. They're meeting people. They met these deer people that Mark created because Mark GM'd a game like 1 week when I wasn't there. And they awakened this god, the Blood King. This god that had been like not killed but like put to sleep or something like that. Anyway, I'm using the Blood King in Kaya, but he's very different. And I was just wondering if you knew from this town, because I've always loved the idea of the Blood King.
This might have been when I was like running the 7-person like weird system, like I think it was called like the Hero System or something game for like people in my apartment, which was its own mess.
Okay, well, I guess that's that, gamers.
Yeah. Well, if you'd like to email us about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, you can send us to derpsgames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsgames.com. You can follow us on twitch.tv/derpsgames or youtube.com/derpsgames, where these go out live. Rate and review us on iTunes wherever you find podcasts. Buddy, you have anything you're looking to promote?
I have one thing I'm looking to promote. The Airframe Ultra Beta is going on this weekend. Second one, 2 new maps, the bunch of balance changes and stuff like that. You have until midnight tonight Pacific to sign up and play for the weekend. So get into it. Okay, watch the trailer. The trailer has Rachel's VO because we made the trailer and I had the note. I was just like, man, we really ought to just like have a little tiny VO to sell the personality of this racer a little bit better. And I just went into the other room. And I was like, I need you to watch this trailer for 5. Just keep watching the trailer, and as you just say stuff into the microphone. And I passed it on to the designer, who chose a couple of them, and we just layered in the little barks in there. So yeah.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah. So sign up for that. Yeah. Well, with that, I'm going to say, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.